Hey everybody, and Tony here with a review of Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales, also known as Ayakashi Japanese Classic Horror, and its first installment, Yotsuya Kaidan, known in English as Yotsuya Ghost Story, which initially aired in Japan on Fuji TV's Noitamina block from January 12 to 26, 2006, and aired in the USA on Imagination TV from August 21 to September 11, 2007. This was based on Tsuruya Namboku IV's 1825 play Tokaido Yotsuya Kaidan, which in turn was based on the legend of Oiwa. It was directed by Tetsuo Imazawa. The screenwriter was Chiaki J. Konaka. The character designs were done by Yoshitaka Amano. The studio in charge of the animation was Toei Animation. It was originally licensed by Genyon, but it's now out of print. The English dub was recorded in Vancouver by the Ocean Group, and it starred the voices of, on the Japanese side, Osamu Saka, Hiroaki Hirata, Mami Koyama, Yuko Nagashima, Keiichi Sonobe, Wataru Takagi, and Ryo Hirohashi. And on the English side, we have Ron Halder, Brian Dobson, Nicole Oliver, Rebecca Schoiket, Samuel Vincent, Michael Adamthwaite, and Lalainia Lindbjerg. Now, since Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales has 3 different stories, even though it ran for 11 episodes, tackling this entire series all in one video would prove to be kind of tedious. So I decided to tackle each story one by one because of the fact that it had different voice actors, directors, and character designers. So the first one to be reviewed is Yotsuya Kaidan. Yotsuya Kaidan is a rather fascinating and interesting tale of betrayal, revenge, and infidelity. And one of the most fascinating characters in the story is none other than Oiwa, a woman who was wronged and betrayed by her husband, the samurai, Iemon Tamiya, and because of her death by poisoning, which then disfigured her face and was also, in some cases, punctured by a katana, and in other cases pushed down a cliff by Iemon, she comes back as a vengeful spirit known as an onryo to not only haunt Iemon, but also destroy his new wife, Ome, and his new father-in-law found in Kihei Ito. This story has been adapted into a play back in 1825 by one Tsuruya Namboku IV, which has proven to be so popular that it was adapted into movies. It was also a subject for arts, and of course, the subject for this particular anime series found in Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales. And I managed to get into this particular story 10 years ago during the time I was a 15-year-old high schooler, and I first caught this on Animax. And my 15-year-old mind thought to myself that this was extremely fascinating, complete with a lot of depth and complexity, and I found it to be so awesome to witness. And I knew that this was going to be an anime to look out for from beginning to end. Its interesting character designs and, of course, its bone-chilling story managed to put me on the edge of my seat. And this was definitely a great introduction to what is otherwise a pretty underrated anime. And of course, it's all thanks to Yotsuya Kaidan's fascinating yet disturbing tale of retribution, betrayal, and infidelity. Story-wise, this basically tells the tale of a samurai by the name of Iemon Tamiya, who is married to this lovely young woman by the name of Oiwa. Oiwa is really faithful to her husband, and of course, she has a sister by the name of Osode, who is then betrothed to Yamoshichi Sato. However, Osode is also the object of Naosuke's lust, and of course, Naosuke wants to do away with Yamoshichi. The gist of this story is Iemon's betrayal to Oiwa. Once Iemon is presented with a much younger girl in the form of Ome Ito, through her grandfather, Kihei, Oiwa is then given a medicine which is actually a poison after Oiwa bore their child. So unbeknownst to Oiwa, she then consumes the poison which has been diluted in hot water, and it's then that she discovers that her body is really suffering. Not only that, but her face is disfigured because of the poison. Once the servant Takuetsu is about to make advances on her, Oiwa threatens to kill him, but because of the pain that she went through and because of Iemon's betrayal, she is then killed by her own sword. It wasn't just the poison that did her in, but the accidental movement towards the sword that did her in. So what follows is a dark tale of revenge, infidelity, and betrayal. And it's definitely a pretty dark tale. And interspersed between the main story is, of course, Tsuruya Namboku IV's monologuing. Sure, it can be a little bit hoity-toity at times, but other times I found his monologuing to be quite fascinating, as if though that we, the viewers, are looking at his tale from his perspective. He feels like he's brought upon this curse through this otherwise really famous legend. So I'm not going to mince words here. The story is fascinatingly dark, with a few twists and turns here and there, and of course, it managed to be quite interesting. And do look out for the epilogue for those of you who are also interested in a little bit of Japanese theater history, and of course, a little bit of Japanese film history as to how it evolves around Yotsuya Kaidan. For me, I found it to be quite interesting, and I dare not spoil the ending, but let's just say that it's both disturbing yet quite satisfying, and it does bring a fine closure to all the 4 episodes. And for 4 episodes of Yotsuya Kaidan, it certainly served its purpose. Sure, I would have loved to have a little bit more development on the story so that the characters would be fleshed out a lot more, but otherwise, it was a pretty solid package from beginning to end. The animation is pretty well done, using such interesting character designs, with all the characters looking pretty slim as if though they came out of some Japanese painting. And I have to say that the character designs looked pretty good. And of course, its usage of imagery and atmosphere is also quite haunting, especially when we get to see Oiwa's ghost. The hallucinations which Iemon faces definitely prove themselves to be very bone-chilling, with every detail coming into such a dark sense of glory, and it is definitely a very fascinating experience from beginning to end. Overall, I dare not mince words here. The animation was really solid. It was pretty well detailed, not only on the characters, but also on all the backgrounds. The music is really well done, especially when you have the incidental music which managed to build up the atmosphere and tension of the story. And of course, the opening and ending songs were pretty good. The opening was Heat Island, rapped by Rhymester, and even though this opening is slightly more akin to an action anime, it managed to really get me pumped up for what is otherwise a dark and gruesome tale. And this particular opening managed to leave me on the edge of my seat, and it managed to be pretty exciting, even though the style doesn't really gel with the much more ancient style of each of the stories told. I thought that Heat Island, rapped by Rhymester, was a pretty good opening, and it managed to leave me pumped up for what I'm about to witness. And of course, the ending song, which was Haru no Katami, known in English as Memento of Spring, was sung gorgeously by Chitose Hajime. And what's also interesting about this song is that it is in the Shimauta style, as in it has this type of ancient Japanese feeling through the vocals, through the instrumentals, and of course, Chitose Hajime's gorgeous voice managed to be so soothing, and it also gelled pretty well with the haunting atmosphere of Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales. The characters are both fascinating yet disturbing. Starting off with our narrator, Tsuruya Namboku IV, he is a pretty fascinating enigma. He basically serves as not only the narrator, but he also does a fair amount of exposition. Sure, some people do find him a little bit hoity-toity, and he managed to kind of drag the story, but for me, even though he does come up a little bit hoity-toity, he managed to do a pretty good job really building up the story, and of course, his enigmatic presence managed to put me on the edge of my seat. How he was able to carry the story along was done in a way that makes him all the more fascinating, and one can definitely see that even though he is a wise old man, he's still very weary of what his story has brought upon the world, with its very dark themes, and of course, a woman in the form of Oiwa who has been wronged and betrayed by the man who was supposed to be faithful to her, Iemon Tamiya. So overall, Tsuruya Namboku IV's presence in the story was pretty fascinating as he questions what his work has brought upon the world, what his work has brought upon popular culture, and of course, what his work has brought upon in general. He was a very fascinating enigma to witness from beginning to end, and he was just an overall fine character and an equally fine narrator. Then we go to the main characters in the story, starting off with Iemon Tamiya. Now, Iemon Tamiya is a character I love to hate. This guy is selfish, he is cruel, ruthless, cold-hearted, and just an overall nasty person. Nonetheless, he is definitely a pretty fascinating villain. On the outside, he seems to have a code of honor, being a samurai, but then ended up being a ronin. He seems to value his honor, and he seems to be the type of gentleman who is pretty respectable, especially when he catches the eye of one Ome Ito. But on the inside, he is pure scum. He acts as an accomplice to do away with his own wife. He doesn't even give a crap about her nor her newborn child. And of course, he's definitely someone I would really love to have the pleasure of assassinating him because of just how heartless and nasty he is. But nonetheless, he is a pretty fascinating character because of his cruelty and nastiness. He's even fascinating when he goes insane, especially when he sees all of his hallucinations of the dead Oiwa and the dead Kohei. But it doesn't really excuse him for how despicable he is as a character. So I'm not going to mince words here. Iemon Tamiya is a bastard I love to hate with a passion, all because of his cold-hearted nature. Now we also have his wife, Oiwa. Oiwa is a really beautiful young woman who is faithful to Iemon. She will do everything and anything to make sure their marriage works. But once she discovers his treachery, she feels lost. She feels angered. She feels betrayed even when she dies and comes back as an onryo. She definitely wants her revenge. So it's definitely really fascinating and really disturbing to see how a pure-hearted, kind-hearted, beautiful, loving, and really gracious young woman like Oiwa metamorphosize into an avenging angel who is out for Iemon's blood, thus tormenting his mind, and how her illusion managed to make Iemon slaughter both Ome, his new young wife, and her grandfather. So I'm not going to mince words here. Oiwa is a fascinating character who at times I feel pretty sorry for, especially after she realized that Iemon betrayed her and their marriage, and she even tried to congratulate the new pair by trying to make herself look pretty and make herself look dignified, but it's all too late. Even as she's combing her hair just falls down in shreds, and they rip out of her scalp, which is quite disturbing. And it makes one feel rather bad for her. So she is a pretty fascinating character who at times I feel really sad for. We also go to her sister Osode, who is also loyal and dignified and also equally beautiful. She's been betrothed to Yomoshichato, but she is also the object of Naosuke, who constantly lusts after her. She is a decent and strong-minded young woman, but on the other hand, her characterization does feel a little bit on the simplistic side, as she is basically the loyal woman who will do no wrong, who seems to have no ulterior motives, but when she discovers that her sister was murdered by Iemon, she definitely goes ballistic to the servant Takuetsu. She definitely is a pretty fascinating character as well, even though she's a bit on the simple side. Naosuke is yet another magnificent bastard. He's not as dastardly as Iemon, but he has his fair share of being such a bastard. He doesn't even measure up to how much I love to hate Iemon, but his deeds and what he is as a character certainly make me love to hate him, but slightly a little bit lesser than Iemon. He is a slimy and sleazy scumbag who lusts after Osode, and he is a pretty unlikable character in of himself, but he's unlikable in the way that makes him quite fascinating. He managed to also carry the story pretty well with his unlikable nature, but nonetheless, he is quite a fascinating douchebag to watch. Yomoshichi Sato is probably one of the most honorable characters in this entire story, and what makes him so likable is his dignity and integrity. The way he managed to be a pretty pure-hearted character in a story consisting of characters who are pretty nasty is definitely saying something about his character. He is a samurai not only in his duty, but also in his character. He is upright, he is steadfast, strong-willed, and he will not let anything shake him. He is definitely a pretty fascinating character, and he's pretty much one of the purest characters in this entire show. Ome starts off as a pretty shy and timid young girl whose countenance is just like a cherry blossom. She is, simply put, rather cute and really adorable, but that's just the outer shell. Her inner shell is quite callous and equally nasty and pretty manipulative, which should come off as no surprise, as this brat has been pampered by her grandfather for many years. Not much is known about her biological parents and what became of them, but it's safe to say that her grandfather, Kihe, pampers her day in and day out. Kihe, Ome's grandfather, is kind of despicable of how he pampers his own granddaughter. He's not really aware of the consequences that would be wrought upon Oiwa, and he himself is kind of despicable for how he pampers Ome. Gohei is yet another character I feel pretty sorry for because he's essentially the butt monkey of the story with his design and how he pleads to Iemon to forgive him because, sure, he did steal the medicine, but even then he doesn't deserve this cruel of a treatment, especially when he gets slaughtered by Iemon's own hands. Gohei may be a butt monkey, but he is a character I feel pretty sorry for. Takuetsu basically serves as one of the loyal servants of Iemon. In the original play, Takuetsu is a brothel owner, but I think the writers decided to change his character up a bit to make him all the more kind and all the more merciful towards not only Iemon but also that of Oiwa. Takuetsu is then bribed by Iemon to make advances to Oiwa, but even then, he is also the witness of what was Oiwa's tragic demise. Takuetsu is a pretty good character in his own way, though I'm sure he would have benefited from a little bit more development. Shobe is also yet another faithful servant to Iemon. He's loyal, He is basically someone who is obedient to him, even though he himself can be kind of a jerk from time to time. But even though he does have his few moments of being a jerk, he does have a shred of pure-heartedness, even though it's very few and far between. Omaki is the Ito's servant, even though she does have a hint of nasty in her system. Someone Yotsuya is the one who basically is not in favor of both Iemon and Oiwa being married to each other. And he knows it, and we the viewers also can side with him because Iemon is nothing more than a heartless jerk, and we cannot help but even agree with someone. Okuma is Iemon's mother, and it seems as though that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, as she is equally as nasty as her son. But in the scale of nastiness, her son is just as nasty as his own mother, especially when she badly abuses Jirokichi, Kohei's only son. And Jirokichi, even though his role in the story is quite small, he is basically the only kid character in the story who has a semblance of importance, as he is Kohei's son, who is badly treated by Okuma, but is then possessed by Oiwa. So overall, the characters were pretty awesome, even though there were some characters that were pretty despicable in their actions. There's still something quite fascinating and something that is quite complex about them. The voice acting in both tracks was really, really great. Starting off with Osamu Saka as Tsuruya Namboku IV, he managed to give this particular gentleman a lot of wisdom, and he managed to bring in a lot of grace to this character. He makes him all the more fascinating to witness, and he also manages to make him quite the enigma, thus making his portrayal all the more fascinating and all the more awesome. Ron Halder also does a very fine job with bringing in Tsuruya's sense of wisdom and honor, but at the same time he managed to also bring in a sense of weatheredness to this character. And I also have to give a lot of kudos to both Osamu Saka and Ron Halder for also giving Tsuruya Namboku IV's really weathered nature. Hiroaki Hirata managed to be so serpentine as Iemon with his cool, collected, and really snake-like sounding voice. He was able to make Iemon come alive with all of his nastiness and all of his bile, thus making his performance very fascinating. In terms of Brian Dobson's portrayal of Iemon, he's a little bit more of a guttural growler, but is nonetheless very fascinating as an actor, as he managed to give Iemon a bit of honor and a bit of dignity to this character, even though he is a pretty despicable character. And you really have to give it to both Hirata-san and Mr. Dobson, as they managed to put in their silky smooth and warm sounding baritone voices to fine use for what is otherwise a despicable character. Mamiko Yama does a fine job with making Oiwa a dignified and beautiful character, and when she goes to her Onryo state, she becomes so chillingly awesome. She is able to make this character feel as disturbed, and one can feel her pain, her torment, and her agony, especially when she is about to try to beautify herself, but it's all too late. Nicole Oliver also does a very fine job with making Oiwa a beautiful and dignified young woman. And even though some of her moments of torment and pain do come off as a bit forced, I still have to give a lot of kudos to Nicole Oliver for being a dedicated voice actress. Yuko Nagashima, who I first knew as Milena from the Strega, did a very wonderful job with making Osode come to life with her dignity and her unique sense of charm. She makes Osode a pretty likable and a pretty awesome character to boot. The same thing I can say about Rebecca Schweikert. I mainly know her in a lot of teenage girl / young boy roles, but hearing her voice a mature young woman really does show how versatile of a voice actress Rebecca Schweikert can be. She really does give Osode her dignity, integrity, and her overall beauty, and she did so in a way that made her very fascinating. Keiichi Sonobe was wonderfully slimy as Naosuke. With his snarls and his growls, he's able to make this particular scumbag come to life so effectively. He was able to breathe in a lot of fire to this character that I was both fascinated and terrified by Sonobe-san's performance. The same thing I can say about Samuel Vincent's performance as Naosuke. And even though he's mainly well known for comedic characters like Double D from Ed, Ed and Eddie, and good guys like Afronzala from Gundam Seed, hearing Mr. Vincent voice a scumbag like Naosuke is not only fascinating, but really skin-crawlingly awesome. He inhabits this role so well and so effectively that there were times my hair stood on end. And on a more irreverent note, I can't even imagine Double D saying these lines. He might come off as a bit out of character. And joking aside, Samuel Vincent does prove himself to be versatile as a voice actor, with making Naosuke's slime and sleaze come to life, and he was just an overall amazing vocal performer, thus proving himself to be extremely versatile, and he was a very charismatic vocal performer. Both Wataru Takagi and Michael Adamthwaite did a very fine job with giving Yomoshichi a lot of dignity and integrity, and he made him an overall handsome character to listen to. With Wataru Takagi, it should be no surprise that he is an industry veteran. He managed to give Yomoshichi a lot of integrity, and he managed to make his emotionally charged moments all the more fascinating and all the more believable, thus making Wataru Takagi being one of the very few seiyuu to have the title of Man with 1,000 Voices. Michael Adamthwaite also does give Yomoshichi his integrity and fine masculinity and his very good guy character, but there are times his emotionally charged moments do come off as a bit forced. Probably was because he was trying to emulate Takagi-san's more emotionally challenged moments, and he's trying to also emulate his nuances, but otherwise I thought that Mr. Adamthwaite did a very solid job with Yomoshichi. Ryo Hirohashi managed to bring in a sense of brattiness to Ome Ito, but also made her quite Machiavellian in terms of what she wants in Iemon. I could also say the same thing about Laina Lindbjerg. Sure, her voice is slightly more mature than Hirohashi-san's, but I still have to give Miss Lindbjerg a lot of credit for her overall fine talents as a voice actress. Both Taiki Matsuno and Terry Klassen managed to bring to life Gohei's butt monkey nature, but at the same time, he managed to bring in a little bit of sympathy and sorrow for this particular character, and one cannot help but give Gohei a great big hug after everything he had to go through with Iemon. Both Kenichi Morozumi and Jason Simpson given their masculine voices to Chobe, thus making him a loyal servant and making him come alive as a character. Naomi Kusumi as Kihei is a little bit more bombastic in terms of his delivery, and he does this role pretty well, given the fact that Kusumi-san is very well known for voicing a lot of daddies and granddaddies and a lot of middle-aged men in general. He managed to do this role very well, all thanks to his booming baritone voice, and he seems to have a lot of charisma with giving Kihei a lot of life in terms of how he managed to perform. The same thing I can say about Don Brown. Even though he's a little bit more measured in terms of his delivery, he still managed to give that big presence with this particular character, thus proving himself to be a pretty versatile voice actor. Minoru Inaba as Takuetsu managed to make him very alive as a character, especially when it comes to his moments where he is frightened by Oiwa's ghost and every supernatural happening that occurs in this very story. His performance as Takuetsu is very believable, and he also manages to make him a pretty honorable character, and makes him pretty likable. Brian Drummond is a little bit more on the guttural side, but he also manages to give Takuetsu a great amount of honor. And even though his moments where he's scared is a little bit on the less is more side, I still have to give Mr. Drummond a lot of credit for his fine vocal talents on how he was able to make Takuetsu come alive. Both Masato Hirano and Fred Henderson do fine jobs with bringing Salmon Yotsuya's weathered nature come to life. Reiku Suzuki and Kathy Morse managed to make Okuma quite the witch of a character. Both Kokoro Kikuchi and even Rebecca Schweikert managed to emit a fair amount of sympathy as Jirokichi. And we even have such fine vocal performances from, on the Japanese side, Yasunori Masutani and Masaharu Sato. So overall, Ayakashi Samurai Horror Tales Yotsuya Kaidan was a thrilling ride. Even though some of the characters may be despicable, there's always something very fascinating about each of them. And of course, the overall imagery managed to do its magic for us, complete with its darkness and its overall creepy atmosphere. With that said, I give Yotsuya Kaidan 4.5 out of 5 stars. Sure, there were some elements which were quite rushed, but it's overall a very fine package. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in much later for my review of the second story, Tenchu Monogatari. So until then, happy Halloween, everybody!